Hey guys, tonight we delve deep, really deep, beneath the twinkling lights and romantic avenues of Paris. Imagine the scent of freshly baked croissants mixing with an almost imperceptible ancient coolness wafting up from unseen grates in the cobblestones. Picture the elegant Haussmannian buildings, their creamy facades glowing in the twilight, all while a secret city of stone and bone slumbers just meters below your feet, a silent counterpart to the bustling life above. It's a place where millions rest, and frankly, a place where if you got turned around without a very good map and a very, very reliable flashlight, well, let's just say your Parisian holiday might become a permanent one. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know down in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey doesn't begin in the Paris, the one of Eiffel Towers and Louvre pyramids. No, you must go further back, much further. Peel away the centuries, the revolutions, the renaissances, until you find yourself standing on the banks of the Seine in a place called Lutetia Parisiorum. It's the Roman era, and the air is thick with the sounds of construction, the shouts of legionaries, and the clatter of a city taking its first robust breaths. This isn't the sprawling metropolis of today. It's a smaller, more rugged settlement, primarily nestled on the Isle de la site and expanding onto the left bank. You can almost smell the wood smoke from cooking fires, hear the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, feel the raw energy of a city literally being built from the ground up. And what ground it is! Beneath your sandals, beneath the muddy tracks and nascent paved roads, lies the true foundation of Paris, a vast deposit of fine-grained, easily workable limestone. This isn't just any rock. It's Lutean limestone, named, quite appropriately, after Lutetia itself. The Romans, with their keen eye for quality building materials, they didn't build an empire on shoddy workmanship. After all, no 5-year warranties on aqueducts back then quickly recognized its value. It was perfect, strong enough to support multi-story structures, yet soft enough to be quarried and carved with relative ease. Its characteristic creamy white to yellowish hue would come to define the visual identity of Paris for millennia. You watch as Roman engineers, alongside Gallic laborers, begin to extract this precious resource. At first, it's all open-air quarries, great gaping pits dug into the hillsides, particularly on the left bank, in areas that would later become the 5th and 6th arrondissements. The sun beats down, dust fills the air, and the rhythmic chip-chip-chip of picks and chisels is the city's first industrial soundtrack. Imagine the sweat, the sheer muscle power required, levering out massive blocks of stone, shaping them, and hauling them to build temples, forums, bathhouses, and sturdy villas. You can see the stone itself gleaming in the sunlight, almost eager to become part of something grand. It's a fascinating thought that this very limestone is packed with tiny marine fossils, notably serrathid gastropods, a quirky tidbit meaning that Paris is, in a very real sense, built upon the compressed remains of ancient sea creatures. So, as you admire a centuries-old Parisian facade, you're looking at a prehistoric aquarium, sort of. But as Lutetia grows, and then later, as Paris itself expands dramatically through the medieval period, the demand for this stone becomes insatiable. The easily accessible surface deposits start to dwindle, so the quarrying techniques adapt. Instead of digging down, they begin to tunnel in. They follow the best seams of limestone horizontally, burrowing into the hillsides, creating a network of subterranean galleries. You don't see this happening from the bustling city streets above. Life continues, markets thrive, festivals are celebrated, history unfolds, all while unseen, a hollow world is being carved out beneath. This is where that subtle coolness you sometimes feel from the grates begins to make sense. You are, quite literally, walking on honeycomb ground. The city's foundations aren't entirely solid. They are, in many places, a relatively thin crust of earth and older fill, supported by a labyrinth of these ancient quarry tunnels and pillars of unexcavated stone left behind by the quarrymen. Historians still argue whether the initial widespread shift from open-air pits to these more complex tunnel networks was primarily driven by the simple depletion of surface stone or by an early, perhaps even accidental, development in more sophisticated mining techniques. Either way, the result was the same, a hidden vacancy spreading like roots beneath the growing city. Close your eyes for a moment and try to feel it. Picture yourself strolling through what will one day be the Latin Quarter. The laughter from a nearby tavern, the rumble of an ox cart. But beneath your feet, just a few dozen meters down, there's nothing. Or rather, there's an emptiness, a void punctuated by pillars of rock. It's like walking on a giant, very old creme brulee, and you just have to trust that the caramelized sugar crust is going to hold. You might not consciously register it, but perhaps there's a subtle vibration that travels differently through the ground here, a faint resonance that speaks of the hollows below. The air itself, drawn down into these cooler, darker spaces, might carry a different humidity, a whisper of the earth's deep breath. This legacy of limestone extraction is the silent, often forgotten, first chapter in the story of subterranean Paris. Long before it became a place of refuge or secrets or even rest for the departed, it was a work site, a source of the very bones that would build the city above. The Romans started it. Subsequent generations continued it with gusto, largely unaware or unconcerned about the vast, interconnected emptiness they were creating. They were building their present, inadvertently shaping a very unique problem, and a very unique space for Paris's future. The ground beneath your feet is not as solid as it seems. It's a history book written in negative space, each tunnel a sentence, each cavern a paragraph, telling a story of ambition, resourcefulness, and a relentless human drive to build. And you're just beginning to sense the scale of this unseen world, this shaky foundation upon which so much history will be precariously balanced. The Roman ambitions fade into the mists of time, but the hunger for Lutean limestone only intensifies as Paris, no longer Lutetia, blossoms through the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. Picture the city growing upwards and outwards, a magnificent, chaotic sprawl. Notre Dame Cathedral reaches for the heavens, its soaring vaults and intricate facades all crafted from that familiar creamy stone. Royal palaces, abbeys, the Sorbonne, private mansions for the burgeoning merchant class, all demand vast quantities. And so, the quarrying continues, but it changes. It goes deeper, becomes more systematic, and infinitely more dangerous. You are no longer just looking at open pits under a forgiving sun. Now you must descend. Follow the flickering light of a simple tallow lamp, held in the calloused hand of a carrier, a quarryman. The air grows cool and damp almost immediately as you step away from the surface. The entrance often a simple, unassuming opening in a hillside on the city's outskirts, or sometimes, more daringly, by a shaft sunk directly down from a discreet courtyard within the city itself. The transition is stark. One moment, the familiar sounds of Parisian life, the cries of street vendors, the clatter of hooves on cobblestones. The next, a profound, earthy silence, broken only by the drip of water, the scuff of your boots, and the rhythmic clang of tools. You are now in their world, the shadowy realm of the men who built Paris from below. They are a tough, close-knit community, often from specific villages known for their quarrying expertise. Their work is unimaginably arduous. Imagine spending 10-12 hours a day in near total darkness, breathing air thick with stone dust that will inevitably shorten your life. The only light comes from those sputtering lamps, casting long, dancing shadows that transform familiar rock formations into grotesque beasts or watchful spirits. It's no wonder a rich folklore of subterranean sprites and dangers emerge from these depths, a way to personify the very real perils they faced. You watch them at work. Some are hagurs, the men who cut the stone blocks from the rock face using long-handled picks and saws. Their muscles strain, sweat glistens on their backs in the lamplight. You hear the grating sound of metal on stone, a sound that echoes eerily through the narrow galleries. Others are batteurs, responsible for loading the heavy blocks onto sledges or carts. And then there are the rouleurs, who maneuver these burdens through the winding, often low-ceilinged tunnels to the surface or to wider collection points. It's a slow, back-breaking ballet of brute force and practice skill. A single misstep, a moment of inattention, could mean a crushed limb or worse. The methods are ingenious, born of necessity. They leave behind pillars of unexcavated stone, the pilier's torns, to support the roof of the quarry, a critical safety measure, though cave-ins were a constant, terrifying threat. You see how they assess the rock, listening for the subtle sounds that might indicate instability, tapping it with their tools, relying on generations of inherited knowledge. Historians still argue whether these early quarrymen possessed a truly systematic understanding of geological stress and load-bearing principles, or if their methods were primarily trial and error, honed by tragic experience. Either way, the fact that large sections of Paris didn't simply collapse into these voids is a testament to their often underestimated skill. Look at the walls around you. They are not smooth and uniform. They bear the marks of countless tools, the scars of their labor. You might see niches carved into the stone, places where they rested their lamps or kept a small canteen of water or wine. Sometimes you'll find crude carvings, a date, an initial, a simple symbol, a poignant reminder of the individuals who toiled here, their identities mostly lost to history. It's a stark contrast to the grand architecture they were enabling above. They were the unseen engine, the hidden hands. One quirky tidbit from this era: some quarrymen developed a peculiar, almost second-sight ability to navigate these pitch-black mazes. They knew the tunnels by feel, by the slight variations in the stone texture, the subtle changes in airflow, the acoustics of different chambers. It was said they could smell their way, though it was more likely an incredibly developed sense of spatial awareness, a human form of echolocation, perhaps. For an outsider like you, every tunnel looks disturbingly similar, a recipe for instant, hopeless disorientation. Trying to find your way out of here without a guide would be like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in the dark, blindfolded, after being spun around 50 times. Not recommended. The scale of these operations is staggering. By the 17th and 18th centuries, it's estimated that hundreds of kilometers of quarry tunnels snake beneath Paris and its surrounding areas. The extraction was often unregulated, a chaotic free-for-all. Landowners would happily lease the rights to quarry beneath their property, pocketing the fees with little concern for the structural integrity of their land or their neighbors. This laissez-faire attitude, this out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach to what lay beneath, was creating a ticking time bomb. The city above was getting heavier, grander, while its foundations were being stealthily hollowed out. You can feel a sense of foreboding in these tunnels, even amidst the sweat and toil of the quarrymen. It's not just the physical danger of their work. It's the growing disconnect between the glittering city on the surface and this vast, dark, exploited underbelly. The men here are strong, yes, but also resigned. They are paid little, their health suffers, their lives are hard. They are essential, yet invisible. They are literally undermining Paris, block by block, so that Paris can soar. The irony is as thick as the dust in the air. This relentless quarrying, this shadowy toil, isn't just shaping stone, it's shaping the future vulnerabilities of the city, setting the stage for a crisis that will eventually demand an equally audacious, subterranean solution. For now, you are simply a witness to the immense hidden labor that made Paris possible, a labor performed in darkness, echoing with the ghosts of its countless forgotten workers. You ascend from the cool, dusty silence of the quarries, blinking in the Parisian sunlight, back into the teeming streets of the 18th century. There up here is different. It's not just the warmth or the light, it's the smell. Oh, the smell. It's a complex, layered aroma, and not in a good artisanal bakery kind of way. Beneath the everyday city scents of wood smoke, horses, unwashed bodies, and whatever questionable concoction is simmering in that street vendor's pot, there's a deeper, more pervasive miasma. It's Swedish, cloying, and utterly grim. It's the smell of decay, the smell of death, and it's becoming unbearable. This olfactory assault is emanating primarily from the city's ancient churchyards and cemeteries, most notably the Cimetière des Saints Innocents, or Holy Innocents Cemetery. Located right in the heart of Paris, near the bustling Les Halles market district, it's been the primary burial ground for Parisians for centuries. Imagine a relatively small plot of land, not much bigger than a modern city square, that has been receiving the dead for nearly 1,000 years. Not just one or two bodies a day, but dozens, sometimes hundreds during plagues or famines. It's not so much a cemetery as a human landfill. You edge closer, holding a perfumed handkerchief to your nose, though it does little to mitigate the stench. The ground level of Saints Innocents is significantly higher than the surrounding streets, a testament to the sheer volume of human remains interred there. It's like a slowly rising, macabre island in the city. The walls surrounding it are lined with charniers, or charnel houses, arched arcades where bones, exhumed from older graves to make way for new ones, are neatly stacked and displayed, skulls grinning vacantly at passers-by. It's a very public memento mori, but practicality is also at play. There's simply no more room in the ground. The problem is one of simple mathematics and decomposition, or rather, the lack thereof. So many bodies have been packed into this consecrated earth that the soil itself is saturated, unable to properly break down the organic matter. Graves are shallow, often mass graves. You hear stories, whispered with a shudder by local residents, of bodies being buried only a few feet deep, wrapped in simple shrouds because coffins are a luxury for the wealthy. During heavy rains, the ground becomes a fetid soup, and locals swear they can see. Well, you can imagine. Sometimes, the pressure from the decomposing mass below is so great that the ground literally swells and cracks. This isn't just an assault on the senses, it's a genuine public health crisis. The mainstream historical fact is that by the mid-1700s, physicians and scientists were increasingly linking the foul air or miasma emanating from such sites to the spread of disease. While their understanding of germ theory was still decades away, they weren't wrong about the danger. The cemetery was polluting the local water sources. Cellars of nearby houses would sometimes flood with a gruesome, dark liquid seeping from the saturated ground. Imagine trying to sell cheese or bread in Les Halles without aroma clinging to everything. It's a wonder anyone had an appetite. One particularly gruesome incident, often cited, occurred in 1780 when a cellar wall adjoining Saints Innocents collapsed under the pressure of the piled-up corpses and decaying matter, spilling a truly horrific tide of remains into the unfortunate homeowner's basement. That, understandably, was a bit of a wake-up call for the authorities. You see the people living and working around the cemetery. Their faces are etched with a kind of weary resignation. They complain to the city officials, they petition the king, but for a long time, little is done. Tradition, religious sentiment, and the sheer logistical nightmare of dealing with centuries of burials make relocating a cemetery an almost unthinkable prospect. Plus, the church had significant vested interests in its burial grounds. Historians still argue whether the prolonged inaction was due more to bureaucratic inertia, powerful church influence, or a genuine lack of viable alternative solutions at the time. A quirky tidbit, amidst this grim reality, Saints Innocents was also a vibrant social hub. Prostitutes solicited clients under the charnel house arcades, scribes set up shop to write letters for the illiterate, merchants sold their wares, and lovers arranged trysts. It was a place where the sacred and the profane, life and death, literally rubbed shoulders. Children played games amongst the tombstones. It's a stark reminder of how different societal attitudes towards death were, much more integrated into daily life, even if that integration was becoming dangerously unsanitary. You might even see an early version of a food blogger making notes on which vendor near the cemetery walls had the least tainted-smelling sausages. Probably not, but the juxtaposition is jarring. Other cemeteries across Paris faced similar, if perhaps less extreme, issues. Churches had their own burial plots, often crammed into tiny courtyards, contributing to the overall problem. The city was, quite literally, choking on its dead. The ground could not absorb them, the air could not disperse their scent, and the living were increasingly sickened by their proximity. It was a slow-motion disaster, a festering wound in the heart of one of Europe's most glamorous cities. Something had to give. The groaning graveyards were not just a metaphor, they were a physical reality, their silent occupants demanding a reckoning. The ancient limestone quarries, those vast, forgotten hollows you recently explored, were still down there, silent and empty. A problem above, a solution below? The connection had yet to be formally made, but the pressures were mounting, just like the bodies in Saint's Innocence. The city was desperate for a breath of fresh air, in every sense of the word. The stench of Saint's Innocence and the growing public outcry finally become too much for even the most tradition-bound Parisian authorities to ignore. That basement wall collapsing in 1780, disgorging its gruesome contents, was the tipping point. You can almost feel the collective shudder that ran through the city, a realization that the dead were no longer content to stay respectfully buried. They were, in a most unpleasant way, making a comeback. The King's Council of State, spurred by increasingly alarmed reports from physicians, police, and city planners, begins to seriously consider what was once unthinkable, the closure and evacuation of Paris's central cemeteries, starting with the most notorious offender, Saint's Innocence. You find yourself privy to the hushed, urgent discussions taking place in smoke-filled back rooms and official chambers. Imagine the scene: bewigged officials, their faces pale in the candlelight, poring over maps of the city. The air is thick with the scent of old paper, beeswax polish, and perhaps a lingering hint of that pervasive cemetery miasma, even here. The primary question isn't if they should act, but how. What do you do with the remains of millions of Parisians, some of whom have been interred for centuries? You can't just incinerate them. The church would object, and besides, the logistics would be staggering. Reburying them in new cemeteries on the outskirts of the city is an option, but that would require vast amounts of land and still doesn't solve the problem of the sheer volume of bones already disturbed and stacked in the charnel houses. It's Lieutenant General of Police Louis Thiroux de Cross and later Charles Axel Guillemot, Inspector General of Quarries, who become key figures in championing a truly radical idea. You hear their voices, calm but firm, proposing a solution that initially strikes many as ghoulish, even sacrilegious. Their gaze on those maps drifts downwards to the notations indicating the vast network of abandoned limestone quarries that you, of course, are already familiar with. Those truths beneath Paris, the very voids left by the city's builders, now present themselves as a potential, if macabre, answer. The plan begins to take shape, whispered at first, then debated more openly. Empty the cemeteries and transfer the bones into the depths of these ancient quarries. It's a desperate, daring plan, fraught with challenges. The sheer scale of the operation is mind-boggling. We're talking about an estimated 6 million individuals from Saint's Innocence alone, not to mention remains from other parish cemeteries that would eventually follow. How do you move that much of history, that much humanity, without causing public outrage or worse, riots? The site chosen for the initial transfers is a section of the quarries beneath the plain of Montrouge, then outside the city walls, specifically near a road called Rue de la Thomissoire. The name itself, Issoire's Tomb Street, feels like a darkly appropriate omen. This area was known to have relatively stable and extensive quarry networks, deemed suitable for receiving such a vast quantity. You can picture Guillemot, a man intimately familiar with the treacherous labyrinth beneath Paris, meticulously surveying these tunnels, assessing their suitability, planning routes, and considering ventilation. His knowledge of the quarries, their strengths and weaknesses, is paramount. He's not just thinking about storage, he's thinking about preventing the collapse of Paris from above, a very real concern given the weight of the city resting on these hollows. Indeed, a mainstream historical fact is that Guillemot had already been tasked, since 1777, with inspecting and shoring up these subterranean voids to prevent cave-ins, so his expertise was well established long before the bone transfer idea solidified. There are, naturally, objections. Some citizens are horrified at the thought of their ancestors' bones being disturbed and relocated to dark, damp tunnels. The church raises concerns about the sanctity of the remains and the lack of proper reconsecration in such a place. Historians still argue whether the decision to proceed was driven more by overwhelming public health imperatives or by a growing Enlightenment-era secular pragmatism that was beginning to chip away at traditional religious objections to such matters. Perhaps it was a reluctant combination of both. One quirky tidbit is that early proposals for dealing with the overflowing cemeteries included some rather outlandish ideas. One suggestion was to dissolve the bodies in quicklime, while another, more alchemical in nature, proposed grinding the bones into a kind of phosphorus-rich fertilizer. The catacomb solution, while grim, was arguably less destructive and more respectful than some of the alternatives being floated around. At least it kept the remains You can almost hear city officials saying, "Look, it's not ideal, but it's better than turning grandma into turnip food, not?" The decision is finally made. In 1785, after years of debate and planning, the Council of State orders the closure of the Cimetière des Saints Innocents and sanctions the transfer of its contents to the designated quarries. The legal documents are signed, the edicts proclaimed. A new chapter in Parisian history is about to begin, one that will take place largely in secret, under the cover of darkness. The city is about to perform a kind of reverse burial, exhuming its dead on a massive scale and giving them a new subterranean home. You feel a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The public health disaster of the overflowing cemeteries is finally being addressed. But the solution itself is so audacious, so unprecedented. What will it be like, this new city of the dead, beneath the city of the living? The whispers you hear are no longer just about the problem, but about the impending, monumental task. The daring plan is set in motion, a testament to human ingenuity when faced with a crisis, even if that ingenuity has to delve into the deepest, darkest places. The shadows of the quarries are about to receive their most unusual occupants. The year is 1786. The Cimetière des Saints Innocents, that festering heart of Parisian decay you previously recoiled from, is now a scene of intense, albeit nocturnal, activity. The grand, daring plan is in motion, and you are there to witness its eerie execution. Under the cloak of darkness, a peculiar kind of procession begins, one that will continue for years, not just from Saints Innocents, but eventually from numerous other overcrowded Parisian graveyards. These are the midnight bone processions, a sight both solemn and profoundly unsettling. Imagine the scene. The moon, perhaps shrouded by clouds or casting a stark, silvery light, illuminates the narrow, cobblestone streets. The only sounds are the rumble of heavy, cloth-draped carts, the creak of their wooden wheels, the muffled clip-clop of horses' hoofs, and the low chanting of priests. Torches flicker, casting long, dancing shadows that writhe and twist on the ancient stone walls of the surrounding buildings, making the familiar cityscape seem alien and menacing. You can smell the damp earth, the lingering scent of old decay, and perhaps the sweet, cloying aroma of incense burned by the priests to sanctify the journey and ward off any unquiet spirits. The work begins after dusk, continuing until dawn, deliberately hidden from the majority of Paris's citizens. The authorities are understandably keen to avoid public alarm or morbid spectacle. So you join a small, discreet crowd of onlookers, perhaps a few curious night owls, or those whose homes directly overlook the route, peering from behind shuttered windows. The carts, large and sturdy, are piled high with bones, femurs, tibias, skulls, ribs, a jumbled, anonymous harvest of humanity. They are covered with black funeral drapes, a gesture of respect, but the sheer volume beneath the cloth is unmistakable. Each cart represents hundreds, perhaps thousands, of individuals. These aren't fresh corpses for the most part. They are the dry remains exhumed from the saturated soil of saints' innocence, bones that have lain in the earth for decades, even centuries. Teams of laborers, often former quarrymen or those accustomed to grim work, are tasked with the exhumations. You can picture them working by lamplight within the cemetery walls, digging into the densely packed earth, extracting the skeletal remains with a practiced, if somewhat grim, efficiency. It's a monumental, almost archaeological undertaking. Procession forms. At its head, priests in vestments walk, chanting prayers for the dead, swinging censers that release plumes of fragrant smoke. Their presence lends a veneer of religious solemnity to what is, in essence, a massive state-sanctioned grave relocation. Following them are the bone-laden carts, lumbering slowly through the deserted streets. Guards accompany the convoy, ensuring order and discouraging any unwelcome attention. Remember those silent, hollowed-out quarries you explored earlier? These carts are trundling towards one of the access points, a specially prepared well shaft leading down into the designated section of the Tumiswar quarries. You follow the procession, your footsteps echoing in the quiet night. The journey is slow, respectful, yet undeniably strange. It's a funeral parade for an entire city's ancestry. As they near the entrance to the quarries, perhaps a discreet gate in a high wall, masking a gaping shaft, the carts are halted. The bones are then carefully unloaded. Here, methods vary. Sometimes, they are tipped directly down the well shafts, a cascade of skeletal remains tumbling into the darkness below. You can almost hear the dry rattle and clatter as they fall, the sound that would surely haunt your dreams. Other times, they are lowered in baskets or bags, a slightly more controlled, though no less macabre descent. Historians still argue whether the majority of these transfers were conducted with genuine reverence or if, given the sheer scale and unpleasant nature of the task, a certain rough-and-ready pragmatism inevitably took over, especially for the laborers involved. It's hard to imagine maintaining a state of profound solemnity night after night, year after year, while handling literally tons of human bones. One quirky tidbit relates to the songs and chants of the workers. While the priests intone Latin prayers, it's rumored that the laborers, to keep their spirits up or perhaps to ward off their own fears, developed their own repertoire of work songs, some probably quite irreverent, echoing through the night. It's a very human response to an inhuman task, a bit of gallows humor to lighten the load, you might say. Imagine a sort of yo-ho-ho in a barrow of femurs shanty. Probably not quite, but the sentiment fits. The sheer logistics are astounding. The transfer from Saints' Innocence alone took about 2 years of nightly work from 1786 to 1788, and this was just the beginning. Over the subsequent decades, well into the 19th century, other Parisian cemeteries like Saint-Étienne-de-Grèce and the Cimetière de la Madeleine were victims of the Revolution, including Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, were initially buried, would also be emptied, their contents joining the growing ossuary. A mainstream historical fact is that the Cimetière de Rancis, another major burial ground, was emptied between 1848 and 1859, showing just how long this process continued. You stand at the edge of the quarry shaft, peering down into the impenetrable blackness. The torchlight barely penetrates the depths. From below, you might hear the faint sounds of other workers, already in the tunnels, receiving the bones, beginning the unimaginable task of storing them. It's a one-way journey for these silent passengers. Once they descend into the earth, they will not see the Parisian sky again. As dawn approaches, the last cart is emptied, the final prayers are said. The workers disperse, the priests retire, and the streets are washed clean before the city fully awakens. Paris stirs, unaware of the immense, silent migration that has occurred beneath its slumbering form. The problem of the overflowing cemeteries is being solved, one cartload of bones at a time, under the watchful eyes of the moon and a few hidden observers like yourself. You carry with you the image of those torch-lit convoys, a haunting testament to a city grappling with its past and its dead in the most extraordinary way. The foundations of Paris are not just stone anymore. They are slowly, methodically, becoming bone. The bones have tumbled and been lowered into the dark, damp depths of the Thomassoir quarries. But what you find down there, in these initial stages, isn't an ossuary. It's a bone dump. Imagine vast, unorganized piles of skeletal remains, femurs, skulls, vertebrae, all mixed together in a chaotic jumble, illuminated by the flickering, uncertain light of lamps. It's macabre, certainly, but also profoundly disordered. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, old stone, and that unique, dry, slightly sweet smell of ancient bone. It's here, amidst this skeletal chaos, that one man begins to see not just a solution to a public health crisis, but an opportunity for something more. Enter Louis Etienne Héricard de Thury. He arrives on the scene a little later, around 1810, as Inspector General of Quarries, succeeding Guillemot. The initial transfers had been about practical necessity, getting the bones out of sight and safely contained. Thury, however, possesses a different sensibility. He's a man of science, an engineer, but also imbued with a certain romantic era appreciation for the sublime, the monumental, and perhaps the slightly morbid. He looks at these heaps of anonymous remains, the raw material of Paris's deceased generations, and envisions something beyond mere storage. He sees the potential for a kind of subterranean monument, a place of contemplation, a carefully curated empire of the dead. You watch as Thury directs the workers. No longer are they just randomly piling bones. He institutes a system. The long bones, femurs and tibias, primarily are to be stacked with a surprising, almost architectural precision, forming solid walls. The front of these walls is often decorated with rows of skulls, creating intricate, repeating patterns. It's a bit like some grotesque, oversized masonry, where the bricks are human remains. The smaller bones, the more fragmented pieces, are piled behind these carefully constructed facades, filling the voids and providing support. It's a painstaking process. Imagine the quarrymen, their faces smudged with bone dust and grime, working by lamplight, carefully selecting and placing each skull, each femur, to create these patterns. One popular design is the barrel or keg shape, where stacks of long bones are arranged to resemble giant casks, often with a skull at the center, like a macabre tap. Another features skulls arranged in heart shapes or crosses. It's morbid artistry, a deliberate attempt to impose order, and even a strange kind of beauty onto this overwhelming collection of death. You might wonder if this is respectful or just profoundly weird. It's probably a bit of both. Thury isn't just tidying up, he's designing. He directs the creation of pathways, galleries, and distinct chambers within the ossuary. He wants it to be navigable, to have a sense of progression. He ensures that inscriptions are placed, often poetic or philosophical, reflecting on mortality, life, and the passage of time. These aren't just random quotes. They're carefully chosen to set a specific tone, to encourage visitors, because yes, he already envisions visitors to contemplate their own existence. One famous inscription, for example, reads, "Read. Say I see an empire de la mort. Stop. Here lies the empire of death." Pretty direct, no notes. Historians still argue whether Thury's motivations were primarily practical. Organized bones are more stable and take up less space. scientific, an interest in classifying and studying the remains, though this was limited, or aesthetic and philosophical, a desire to create a unique and awe-inspiring memento mori. It was likely a blend of all these. He was a product of his time, an era that was fascinated by ruins, by the past, and by the grand, often melancholic themes of life and death. He was, in a way, the first curator of the catacombs as we now know them. A quirky tidbit from this period of organization, Thury arranged for the creation of a small display of mineralogical specimens found within the quarries, and even a cabinet showcasing various skeletal deformities and pathological conditions encountered among the bones. It was called the Cabinet de Mineralogie et de Pathologie. This highlights his scientific interest, but also adds another layer of the macabre, a sort of sideshow of skeletal oddities amidst the larger, more uniform displays. It's like going to a museum where the exhibits are not just art, but also the building blocks of the people who might have once visited other museums. Meta, the transformation is remarkable. What was once a haphazard dumping ground becomes something akin to a vast, subterranean sculpture garden or a meticulously organized necropolis. You walk through these newly arranged galleries. The air is still and cool. The only sound is the drip of water echoing into silence and the soft crunch of gravel under your feet. The walls of bones rise on either side of you, stretching into the darkness beyond the reach of your lamp. Skulls stare out from their neat rows, their empty sockets seeming to follow you. It's profoundly affecting. It's not just the sheer number of remains, but the order imposed upon them that creates such a powerful impact. This careful arrangement, this morbid artistry, as some have called it, is what distinguishes the Paris catacombs from simple charnel houses or mass graves elsewhere. It's the result of Thury's vision and the labor of countless workers. He took the city's deepest fear, the overwhelming tide of its dead, transformed it into a place of solemn order and contemplation. A mainstream historical fact is that Héracarte de Thury published a work in 1815 titled Description de Catacombes de Paris, which not only documented the project but also served as an early guidebook, further cementing his role in shaping the public perception and experience of this unique site. You are no longer just in a quarry filled with bones. You are in Héracarte de Thury's creation. He has taken the raw, undifferentiated material of death and given it form, structure, and even a strange kind of dignity. The silent inhabitants of these tunnels are no longer just a jumbled mass. They are now the very fabric of this new subterranean empire. And this empire, thanks to Thury, is almost ready to receive its first official visitors from the world above. The stage is set, the decor is in place, and the effect is undeniably powerful. With Héracarte de Thury's vision largely realized, the ossuary beneath Paris is no longer just a repository of bones. It's a curated experience, a carefully designed environment intended to evoke specific emotions and reflections. As you venture deeper into this empire of death, your attention is drawn to the numerous plaques and inscriptions carved into the stone or set amongst the bone-lined walls. These aren't accidental graffiti. They're integral to Thury's design, serving as a kind of solemn, philosophical guidebook for anyone who dares to enter. You pause before one of the most famous, placed near an early entrance to the ossuary proper, a reap. Say ICI l'Empire de la Mort. Stop. This is the Empire of Death. The lettering is stark, official, almost a command. It's a clear demarcation point, a warning that you are crossing a threshold from the world of the living into a realm governed by entirely different rules. It's not designed to be inviting, but rather to instill a sense of awe and perhaps a little trepidation. You can almost hear the silence grow deeper after reading it, the air cooler. It's a pretty effective abandon all hope ye who enter here, but with a certain Gallic gravitas. As you proceed, other inscriptions appear, each chosen for its thematic resonance. Many are in French, some in Latin, drawing from classical literature, poetry, and religious texts. They speak of the brevity of life, the equality of all in death, the vanity of worldly pursuits, and the hope of resurrection or eternal peace. For example, you might encounter a verse by the poet Salomon de la Brue. Ainsi tout passé sur la terre / esprit, but graces, talent / tel est un fleur éphémère / que renverse le moindre vent. Thus everything on earth passes / spirit, beauty, graces, talent / such as an ephemeral flower / that the slightest wind overturns. Reading this, surrounded by the literal evidence of millions of past lives, gives the words a profound, chilling weight. It's one thing to read such sentiments in a book. It's quite another when the illustrations are actual human skulls. These texts transform the experience from a mere gawk at bones into a guided meditation on mortality. Thury wasn't just stacking femurs, he was crafting a narrative. He wanted you to think, to feel, to confront your own impermanence. You see plaques attributing sections of bones to specific cemeteries from which they came, such as ossements du cimetière des innocents, bones from the cemetery of the innocents, providing a sense of provenance and reminding you of the historical journey these remains have undertaken. Remember that foul-smelling, overcrowded graveyard you visited earlier? Its inhabitants are now here, part of this vast, silent, and surprisingly orderly assembly. Some inscriptions are more directly religious, reflecting the prevailing sentiments of the time, and perhaps an attempt to sanctify the space further. You might find lines from the Book of Job or other biblical sources, speaking of resurrection and divine judgment. This was important, as the catacombs were not initially a consecrated burial ground in the traditional church sense. A mainstream historical fact is that the ossuary was officially consecrated as the Paris Municipal Ossuary on April 7, 1786, the day before the first bone transfers began, with a ceremony involving priests and religious rites. The inscriptions further reinforce this sense of solemn, if unconventional, sanctity. Other markers are more informational, almost like museum labels. You might see a plaque indicating the date a particular section was completed, or the name of an engineer involved in its construction. There's a strange juxtaposition of the deeply personal, the individual bones, each once part of a living person, and the starkly impersonal, the grand, organized, state-managed project. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions achieved their intended effect on all visitors, or if some simply saw them as quaintly morbid decorations. Did everyone who passed through truly contemplate the vanity of earthly existence, or were some just there for the thrill, the spooky skeleton factor? The answer is likely as varied as the visitors themselves. But Thury's intent was clear, to elevate the space beyond a mere boneyard. One quirky tidbit is the story of the Fontaine de la Samaritaine, Samaritan woman's fountain, a natural spring within the quarry system that Thury had channeled and decorated, creating a small grotto-like feature within the catacombs. Near it, an inscription was placed referencing the biblical story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, a passage about living water and eternal life. It's a poignant, almost hopeful counterpoint to the surrounding themes of death and decay, a tiny oasis of flowing water in the midst of so much stillness. Finding a fountain in a place like this is like finding a vending machine in a pyramid, unexpected, and makes you wonder about the plumbing. The overall effect of these carefully placed words is to frame your experience. They tell you what to think, or at least what you should be thinking. They guide your emotions from the initial shock and awe at the empire of death to more nuanced reflections on beauty, talent, and their ephemeral nature. It's a form of emotional and intellectual architecture, as carefully constructed as the walls of bones themselves. As you walk these silent corridors, reading these pronouncements from the past, you realize that Thury was not just designing a tomb, he was designing an encounter. He was using the raw materials of Paris's deceased population and the wisdom of poets and philosophers to create a unique, immersive lesson in what it means to be human, to live, and ultimately to die. The inscriptions are the voice of the catacombs, speaking silently from the stone and bone, ensuring that your journey through this underworld is not just a visual spectacle, but a profound and perhaps unsettling dialogue with mortality itself. The transformation of the quarries from a chaotic bone dump into Heracart de Thury's meticulously arranged ossuary, complete with philosophical inscriptions, naturally began to attract attention. Word spread, not just through official channels, but through whispers and rumors among Parisians. The catacombs, as they were increasingly being called, a name borrowed from the ancient Roman subterranean burial chambers, lending an air of classical gravitas, were no longer just a municipal utility for corpse disposal. They were becoming a destination. You are about to join the ranks of these first curious intruders, experiencing the site as they might have in the early 19th century. Initially, access was restricted, usually granted by special permission from the Inspector General of Quarries, Thury himself, for a time. These weren't casual, drop-in visits. You'd likely be part of a small, guided group, perhaps composed of city officials, visiting dignitaries, scientists, artists, or writers known for their interest in the curious and the macabre. Imagine presenting your letter of introduction, your heart thumping with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation, at the entrance to the old Thomaswar quarry access point, now repurposed as the gateway to this subterranean marvel. You descend the long, winding staircase, a spiral journey downwards that feels like a deliberate transition from the sunlit world of the living to the cool, perpetual twilight of the dead. The air changes, growing damp and earthy, carrying that unique scent of ancient stone and something else, that dry, dusty, not unpleasant, but distinctly bony aroma. Your eyes adjust slowly to the gloom, the primary illumination coming from the flickering torches or oil lamps carried by your guide, and perhaps a few strategically placed lamps along the main pathways. Remember how vast and disorienting the raw quarries were. Now, thanks to Thury's efforts, there's a defined route, though the darkness beyond its edges still feels immense and vaguely threatening. The reactions of these early visitors were, as you can imagine, incredibly varied. For some, it was a profound, almost religious experience. The sheer scale of the ossuary, the silent testimony of millions of lives reduced to neatly stacked femurs and skulls, provoked deep philosophical and moral reflections. You see them in your mind's eye, a gentleman in a top hat, hand to his chin, contemplating a particularly artistic arrangement of skulls, a lady, perhaps clutching a companion's arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. They would have read the inscriptions, like the ones you just encountered, and pondered their meanings in this uniquely resonant setting. For others, the experience leaned more towards the scientific or the antiquarian. Geologists might be fascinated by the quarry walls themselves, the exposed strata of Lutean limestone. Physicians or anatomists might examine the bones with a more clinical eye, noting pathologies or signs of past diseases, much like Thury himself did with his cabinet de pathology. Remember that little display of skeletal oddities? It would have been a highlight for the medically curious, a sort of early anatomical museum. Then there were those drawn by the thrill of the macabre, the allure of the forbidden and the grotesque. This was the Romantic era, after all, an age that found a certain beauty in ruins, melancholy, and the darker aspects of human existence. The catacombs were, in this sense, perfectly in tune with the zeitgeist. You can almost hear the hushed gasps, the nervous laughter, the exclamations of, "How delightfully dreadful!" It was the ultimate dark tourism destination of its day, a place to confront death in a controlled, almost aestheticized environment. Trying to get a selfie with a skull back then would have involved a very long exposure time, and probably a very patient skull. A mainstream historical fact is that among the earliest notable visitors was the Count of Artois, the future King Charles X, who visited in 1787, even before Thury's major reorganizations were complete, indicating a high-level interest from the very beginning. Later, in 1814, Francis I, Emperor of Austria, toured the ossuary, and Napoleon III also made a visit in 1860, by which time it was a more established, if still exclusive, attraction. Historians still argue whether the early official sanctioning of visits, even limited ones, was primarily intended to showcase a remarkable feat of Parisian engineering and civic planning, or if it was also a subtle way of demystifying death and reinforcing social order by demonstrating the ultimate fate of everyone, regardless of station. Perhaps it was a bit of look what we did with all those problematic cemeteries, mixed with a dash of behold, even kings end up as bones. One quirky tidbit concerns the very first concert held in the catacombs. Yes, concerts. In the early 19th century, there are accounts of clandestine and later more organized musical performances taking place in some of the larger chambers. Imagine classical music echoing through those bone-lined halls, the acoustics no doubt unique, the audience a mix of the adventurous and the slightly eccentric. It adds a layer of the surreal to the already strange atmosphere, a symphony for the departed, perhaps. It certainly beats the usual background hum of a fan you might be listening to right now. Not all reactions were positive, of course. Some visitors were undoubtedly overwhelmed, finding the experience too confronting, too morbid. There would have been moments of fear, of claustrophobia, the oppressive weight of millions of souls pressing in. The flickering lamplight would cast deceptive shadows, making the skulls seem to watch, to whisper. It's easy to imagine someone fainting or demanding to be led back to the surface immediately. The catacombs were, and are, a powerful filter for one's own anxieties about mortality. As you complete your imagined early tour, emerging blinking into the daylight, you carry with you not just the visual memory of the bone-lined corridors, but also a sense of the complex human reactions this place provokes. Awe, fear, morbid fascination, philosophical contemplation, scientific curiosity. It's all there. The first curious intruders helped to shape the legend of the catacombs, their stories and impressions filtering out into the wider world, cementing its reputation as one of Paris's most extraordinary and unsettling wonders. Your own quiet journey through these passages is just one more echo in that long history of visitation and reaction. The catacombs, even in their more organized, thoroughly designed state, remained a labyrinth. While the official tour route was relatively clear, the vast majority of the old quarry network, hundreds of kilometers of tunnels spreading beneath Paris like a petrified root system, was not part of this curated experience. These were the unlit, unmapped, and often unstable sections, a true underworld forbidden to the public. And it's in these deeper, darker, and more dangerous passages that you now find yourself, considering the chilling tales of those who ventured too far, those who became lost souls underground. Imagine straying from your guided group, perhaps driven by a reckless curiosity or a simple wrong turn in the dim, confusing light. One tunnel looks much like another. The sound of your companion's voices fades. Suddenly, you are alone. The silence presses in, absolute and unnerving, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from the stone ceiling, each drop echoing like a footstep in the oppressive stillness. Your lamp casts a small, flickering pool of light, pushing back the immense darkness, but also emphasizing its vastness. Every shadow seems to conceal a deeper recess, another branching passage leading to nowhere or everywhere. The fear is palpable. It's not just the darkness or the bones you might still encounter in these less organized sections, as not all quarries were used for the ossuary. It's the profound, crushing sense of disorientation. Which way is out? How far have you come? Panic begins to set in, a cold knot in your stomach. Your breathing quickens. Every rustle, every trickle of falling grit sounds like something approaching or the tunnel groaning under the weight of the city above. Remember those stories of quarrymen who could navigate by feel? You, my friend, do not possess that skill. You are, to put it mildly, up a subterranean creek without a paddle, or a map or a GPS signal. Obviously, legends and rumored accounts abound of individuals who became lost in the catacombs and were never seen again. While concrete, Verifiable historical cases are scarce for the official ossuary section once it was well managed. The broader quarry network is another story. Before the extensive consolidation work undertaken by Guillemot and his successors, these tunnels were notoriously treacherous. Unmarked shafts, sudden collapses, pockets of bad air, the dreaded moffett, or carbon dioxide buildup. These were real dangers. One of the most persistent and famous stories, though its historical accuracy is debated, is that of Philibert Spirit. The tale, often dated to 1793 during the French Revolution, tells of a spirit, supposedly a hospital doorkeeper at the Val de Grace. He allegedly entered the quarries via a staircase in the hospital's courtyard, perhaps searching for a rumored cache of hidden Carthusian liqueur because priorities, or simply exploring. He carried a single candle, which, as the story goes, extinguished, leaving him in total darkness. He wandered lost for days, weeks perhaps, calling out for help that never came, until he finally succumbed to starvation, exhaustion, or despair. His body, the legend continues, was found 11 years later, in 1804, not far from an exit, identifiable only by the ring of keys from the Val de Grace hospital still clutched in his skeletal hand. A tombstone was supposedly erected at the spot where he was found, deep within the unofficial network, bearing the inscription, "A la mémoire de Philibert Spirit, perdu dans cette carrière le 3 November MDCCSI, retrouve en ans après été inhume en la même place le triple X Evral Mixiv." To the memory of Philibert Spirit, lost in this quarry on November 3, 1793, found 11 years later and buried in the same place on April 30, 1804. You can almost feel the chill of his lonely end, the utter desolation of dying alone in the pitch black, surrounded by indifferent stone. Historians still argue whether the Philibert Spirit story is entirely factual, a romanticized legend, or perhaps a composite of several unfortunate incidents. The specificity of the dates and details lends it an air of truth, but contemporary documentation is hard to come by. Regardless of its precise veracity, it perfectly encapsulates the primal fear associated with these tunnels, the terror of being lost, of a slow, isolated death in the dark. It's the ultimate don't go wandering off cautionary tale. A quirky tidbit often associated with such stories is the psychological impact of prolonged sensory deprivation in these dark, silent spaces. People who have experienced being lost underground, even for relatively short periods, report disorientation, hallucinations, both auditory and visual, and an overwhelming sense of dread. The mind, deprived of its usual stimuli, begins to play tricks. That drip of water can become a whisper. A strangely shaped rock can morph into a menacing figure in the peripheral gloom. The true horror isn't just being physically lost, but losing your mental bearings as well. It's like your brain starts generating its own spooky podcast, but without the like and subscribe buttons. You try to imagine what it would be like. Days pass. Your meager food and water run out. Your voice grows hoarse from shouting. Hope dwindles with each passing hour. The silence becomes your only companion, a silence that magnifies every beat of your increasingly frantic heart. The bones of the 6 million in the official ossuary at least have company. To die alone in these unhallowed tunnels is a far more desolate fate. Even in the more modern era, with the rise of urban exploration by cataphiles, more on them later, stories of getting lost, of close calls persist. While modern explorers are generally better equipped, the sheer complexity of the network, estimated at over 200 miles of tunnel under Paris, means the risk of disorientation is ever present for those who venture beyond the known and mapped routes. The stories of these lost souls, whether entirely factual or embellished by time and fear, serve as a potent reminder of the catacombs' dual nature. On one hand, the official ossuary is a place of history, order, and solemn contemplation. On the other, the vast, uncharted network surrounding it remains a wild, dangerous frontier, a place where the city's underbelly can literally swallow you whole. As you stand metaphorically in that unlit passage, the weight of these tales presses down. The chilling despair of Filiberta's spirit, real or legendary, becomes a palpable presence, a whisper of warning from the deep, dark earth. It's a good time to remember that sometimes curiosity really can have rather permanent consequences. The official tours of the catacombs, those sanctioned glimpses into Thuri's ordered empire of death, are one thing. But as the decades and then centuries roll by, a new kind of explorer emerges, drawn not to the curated exhibits, but to the vast, untamed wilderness of the remaining quarry network. These are the cataphiles, a uniquely Parisian subculture of individuals who illegally explore, map, party in, and even create art within the forbidden depths beneath the city. You are now slipping away from the official path, metaphorically of course, to join their shadowy ranks. The term cataphile itself is relatively modern, gaining currency in the latter half of the 20th century, but the tradition of illicit exploration is much older. As soon as the quarries were largely abandoned by miners and before they were fully repurposed or sealed, there were undoubtedly adventurous souls who dared to venture into their depths. But cataphilia as a distinct subculture, with its own codes, ethics, and legendary figures, truly blossomed in the 1970s and 80s. Imagine young Parisians, perhaps fueled by a post-1968 spirit of rebellion and a desire to reclaim forgotten urban spaces, seeking out secret entrances, a manhole cover pried open in a deserted alley, a hidden passage in a forgotten cellar, or even a discreet breach in the wall of the official catacombs. You descend with them, not down a well-maintained staircase, but perhaps by clambering down a rusty iron ladder in a narrow, damp shaft, or wading through a low passage half filled with murky water. The air is thick, heavy, and cool. The only light comes from your headlamps and flashlights, their beams cutting sharp cones through the absolute darkness. This isn't Thuri's neatly organized ossuary. This is the raw, untamed underbelly. Tunnels branch off in all directions, some crudely hewn by medieval quarrymen, others more systematically excavated but still bearing the marks of centuries of neglect. You see graffiti, not the philosophical inscriptions of the ossuary, but layers upon layers of tags, names, dates, and elaborate murals painted by generations of cataphiles. Some of it is simple vandalism, but much of it is surprisingly artistic, a vibrant, clandestine art gallery hidden from the world. These secret tunnel trekkers are a diverse group. Some are historians and urban archaeologists, meticulously mapping the network, discovering forgotten inscriptions from quarrymen, or locating hidden features like old wells or bunkers. Others are artists, using the unique atmosphere and isolation of the tunnels as inspiration, creating sculptures from clay found in the quarries, painting elaborate frescoes on the walls, or staging ephemeral installations. Then there are those who are simply adventurers, drawn by the thrill of exploration, the challenge of navigating the labyrinth, and the allure of the forbidden. And yes, some are there to party. You might stumble upon a hidden chamber dubbed La Plage, the beach, or Le Cellier, the cellar, where cataphiles gather for clandestine concerts, celebrations, or simply to share stories and a bottle of wine in the cool darkness. Remember those early, somewhat formal concerts in the official ossuary? These are their raucous, unofficial descendants. Navigating these tunnels requires skill and knowledge. Cataphiles rely on passed-down information, hand-drawn maps, often jealously guarded, and an intimate familiarity with specific sections of the network. They know which tunnels are prone to collapse, fontis are a constant danger, sudden sinkholes where the ceiling gives way, which are likely to flood after heavy rains, and where to find breathable air. A mainstream historical fact is that a special police unit, the Équipe de Recherche et d'Intervention in Carrière, was established in the late 20th century specifically to patrol the quarries, rescue lost or injured cataphiles, and try to curb illegal access. Their presence adds a cat-and-mouse element to the explorations. You follow your cataphile guides deeper into the network. They point out details you would otherwise miss. The subtle changes in chisel marks that indicate different eras of quarrying, a faint inscription from a worker in the 17th century, the remnants of a German bunker from World War II. It's a living museum, but also a fragile one. Historians still argue whether the activities of cataphiles constitute a valuable form of living heritage and grassroots preservation of these spaces, or if they are primarily a threat due to vandalism, disturbance of historical layers, and the risks they pose to themselves and the structural integrity of the tunnels. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. One quirky tidbit is the existence of cataphile cinemas. Groups have been known to haul generators, projectors, and screens deep into the quarries to host underground film screenings. Imagine watching a horror movie, or perhaps a classic French film noir, in a cavern hundreds of feet beneath Paris, surrounded by the ghosts of ancient quarrymen. It's taking the concept of an underground film to a very literal level. Definitely not your average Netflix and chill. There's a strong sense of community among many cataphiles, but also a fiercely independent, almost secretive streak. Knowledge is shared, but often cautiously. The locations of favored spots, safe routes, and new discoveries are valuable currency. There's an unwritten code of conduct. Leave no trace, or at least, no modern litter. Respect the work of those who came before, and never, ever reveal entrances to outsiders or the authorities. This code isn't always followed, leading to tensions within the community and periodic crackdowns from above. You feel the allure, the pull of this hidden world. It's a place outside of time, beyond the reach of normal city life. Down here, the concerns of the surface world seem distant. There's a unique peace in the silence, a strange beauty in the decay, and the human artistry layered upon it. But there's also constant awareness of risk. A wrong turn, a failing flashlight, a sudden shift in the ground. Danger is always a silent companion. These modern-day explorers, these secret tunnel trekkers, are writing their own chapter in the long subterranean history of Paris, a chapter filled with discovery, artistry, rebellion, and the enduring human fascination with the unknown that lies just beneath our feet. The labyrinthine tunnels beneath Paris, already ancient by the 20th century, were destined to play yet another significant role in the city's history, one far removed from limestone extraction or the solemn repose of bones. As Europe marches towards war and then is engulfed by it, these dark, hidden spaces find a new purpose. They become war's subterranean shelter, a refuge for some, a clandestine headquarters for others, and a silent witness to the anxieties and struggles of a city under occupation. You find yourself in Paris during the grim years of World War II. The city above is under Nazi occupation. Swastika banners hang from familiar landmarks. The jackboots of German soldiers echo on the Champs-Élysées. Fear and suspicion are constant companions. But beneath the streets, in those same cool, damp tunnels you've explored in different contexts, a different kind of activity is stirring. The catacombs and the wider network of former quarries offer a unique advantage. They are hidden, extensive, and largely inaccessible to those unfamiliar with their complex geography. For the French resistance, these tunnels become invaluable. Imagine resistance fighters, young men and women risking everything, moving silently through the darkness, using the quarries as secret meeting places, conduits for communication, and storage depots for weapons or illicit printing presses. They are ghosts in the machine of occupied Paris, able to appear and disappear, frustrating their occupiers. You can picture a clandestine meeting, a handful of figures huddled around a single lantern in a deep chamber, maps spread on a dusty stone, voices low and urgent as they plan acts of sabotage or the dissemination of forbidden news. The very air seems thick with their courage and their fear. One of the most famous instances of the quarries being used by the resistance was as the headquarters for Colonel Roll Tanguy, a prominent leader of the FFI French Forces of the Interior during the liberation of Paris in August 1944. A command post was established in a section of the quarries beneath the Denfert-Trochereau area, ironically very close to the public entrance of the catacombs ossuary. From this subterranean bunker, Roltangi and his staff directed the uprising against the German garrison. A mainstream historical fact is that this command post was equipped with telephone lines and runners who would navigate the tunnels to deliver messages, effectively creating an underground nerve center for the liberation. You can almost hear the crackle of the field telephone, the hurried footsteps of messengers disappearing into the darkness, carrying orders that would help reclaim the city street by street. But the resistance weren't the only ones to see the strategic value of Paris's underbelly. The Germans, too, utilized sections of the quarry network. They constructed air raid shelters and bunkers, recognizing that the thick layers of limestone offered excellent protection from Allied bombing raids. Some of these German-built structures were quite extensive, with reinforced concrete, ventilation systems, and secure communication lines. You might stumble upon one of these ghostly relics in your explorations, a stark concrete wall cutting across an ancient quarry tunnel, perhaps with faded German Gothic lettering still visible. It's a chilling reminder of the enemy presence, even deep beneath the city. Historians still argue about the overall strategic impact of the quarries during the war. While undoubtedly important for localized resistance activities and as shelters, were they a truly decisive factor in the broader conflict or the liberation of Paris? Or was their primary role more symbolic, a hidden bastion of French defiance and a practical, if limited, tool for clandestine operations? The secretive nature of many resistance activities makes a definitive assessment challenging. Beyond organized military or resistance use, the tunnels also offered a desperate, informal refuge for individuals seeking to escape persecution or the dangers of the surface. Jewish Parisians, Allied airmen shot down over France, political dissidents, some may have sought temporary safety in the labyrinth, guided by those who knew its secrets. Imagine the terror of hiding in a cold, damp blackness, listening for sounds from above, never knowing if discovery was imminent. The bones in the nearby ossuary, those silent millions from previous centuries, would have been mute, unknowing companions to these new fugitives. A quirky tidbit: there are stories, perhaps apocryphal, of Parisians using the less-known quarry entrances to conduct black market activities during the occupation, far from the prying eyes of German patrols or rationing officials. A hidden exchange of goods, a secret slaughter of a pig, the tunnels could conceal many things. It's like an illicit, underground Amazon fulfillment center, but for butter and cigarettes instead of books and electronics. Even in the official catacombs ossuary, the war left its mark. While the tours ceased during the occupation, the place itself became a symbol. For some Parisians, it was a reminder of French history and endurance, a silent rebuke to the temporary conquerors. For the occupiers, it might have been just another curiosity, or perhaps a vaguely unsettling reminder of the layers of history beneath their feet. As you navigate these tunnels in your mind, you feel the echoes of that wartime period, the hushed whispers of resistance plotters, the fear of those in hiding, the distant thud of bombs or artillery, the cold resolve of soldiers on both sides. The stone walls seem to have absorbed these intense emotions, adding another layer to their already complex history. The catacombs, born of ancient geology and the city's need to build, then reshaped by the need to bury its dead, now also bear the imprint of modern conflict. They are a testament to the adaptability of such spaces, their ability to serve starkly different human needs across the centuries, from peaceful toil to the desperate struggles of war. The darkness that once hid quarrymen and then bones, now concealed secrets that could mean life or death. The echoes of war gradually fade from the tunnels, but the allure and the dangers of subterranean Paris persist, evolving with the times. As you move into the more contemporary era, the perils you encounter are less about enemy soldiers and more about the natural and man-made hazards inherent in such an ancient and extensive underground network, alongside the thrill of new, often accidental discoveries. The cataphiles you met earlier are still active, but so are the forces of nature, and the slow decay of centuries-old workings. One of the most significant ongoing risks in the former quarries is that of collapse. Remember those pilares torns, the pillars of stone left by the original quarrymen to support the roof? They were not always sufficient, nor were they always left in the most geologically stable areas. Over centuries, water seepage, vibrations from the city above, now including rumbling metro trains, and simple erosion can weaken these supports or the surrounding rock. The result can be a fontis, a sudden and often dramatic collapse of the quarry roof, which can manifest on the surface as a sinkhole, sometimes swallowing roads, parts of buildings, or unsuspecting gardens. Imagine walking through a section of unreinforced quarry tunnel. You glance up at the ceiling, noticing a network of fine cracks, perhaps a bulge in the stone, or the telltale sign of fresh dust trickling down. There's a faint groaning sound, not of ghosts, but of immense geological pressure. It's a stark reminder that the ground beneath Paris isn't entirely solid. It's a delicate, man-altered balance that sometimes, catastrophically, readjusts itself. A mainstream historical fact is that the Inspection Générale des Carrières, IGC, the official body responsible for monitoring and consolidating the quarries, a successor to Guillemot's and Thury's roles, is constantly at work. They map, inspect, and undertake extensive reinforcement projects, injecting grout, building new support walls, and trying to stay one step ahead of potential disasters. It's a never-ending battle against gravity and time. Another persistent peril is bad air. In poorly ventilated sections of the quarries, carbon dioxide, CO2, can accumulate, displacing oxygen. This CO2, known as moffett by old quarrymen, is odorless and invisible, making it particularly insidious. You might enter a tunnel feeling fine, but as you proceed, the air becomes progressively oxygen depleted. Lassitude sets in, followed by headache, dizziness, and eventually unconsciousness and death if you don't retreat. Cataphiles learn to be wary of deep, stagnant sections and often carry lighters or candles. If the flame sputters and dies, it's a clear warning that the air is unbreathable. It's like the tunnels themselves are exhaling, and sometimes that breath is fatal. Yet, amidst these dangers, new finds continue to be made, sometimes by official IGC survey teams, sometimes by adventurous cataphiles. Forgotten sections of quarries are rediscovered, revealing perfectly preserved tool marks from centuries ago, or inscriptions left by long-dead workers. Occasionally, they unearth historical artifacts, old coins, pottery shards, lost tools, or even, in rarer cases, skeletal remains that predate the ossuary transfers, perhaps from ancient burials or unfortunate souls who met their end in the quarries long ago. Historians still argue about the full extent of the Parisian quarry network. While official maps cover hundreds of kilometers, there's ongoing debate and speculation about entirely unknown or long-sealed sections, perhaps under private properties or in areas where records were lost. Every so often, construction work for a new building or a metro line will unexpectedly break through into a previously unrecorded void, offering a tantalizing glimpse into yet another forgotten piece of Paris's underbelly. One quirky tidbit from recent decades involves the discovery of a fully equipped clandestine cinema deep within the quarries in 2004. Police investigating an unrelated matter stumbled upon a large cavern that had been transformed into a movie theater, complete with a full-size screen, projection equipment, seats, and even a bar and restaurant area, all powered by pirated electricity. Perceptual Architectures, as the anonymous group behind it called themselves, had even installed their own telephone lines and security cameras. When the police returned after discovering it, the entire setup had vanished, leaving only a note saying, "Ne cherchez pas, don't search." It was a remarkable feat of secret construction and a testament to the audacity of some modern cataphiles. It makes you wonder what else is down there: a bowling alley, a discreet five-star restaurant for moles. The legal and ethical dilemmas surrounding the quarries also evolve. The authorities grapple with how to manage access, ensure public safety, both for those on the surface and for any illicit explorers below, and preserve the historical integrity of the site. There are ongoing debates about which sections should be reinforced, which should be sealed off permanently, and which might, with proper care, be open for limited official exploration or study. You feel the damp chill of these tunnels, the chill that speaks of both ancient stone and modern anxieties. The risk of a sudden collapse is a heavy presence. The thought of invisible, unbreathable air in the deeper passages is unnerving. Yet the possibility of stumbling upon a hidden inscription, a forgotten chamber, or even a modern art installation adds a layer of excitement, a potential discovery. The quarries are not a static museum. They are a dynamic, ever-changing environment. The city above continues to grow and change, and its subterranean counterpart reflects that, with new pressures, new incursions, and the occasional startling revelation. It's a constant tension between preservation and decay, between official control and clandestine exploration, a silent, ongoing drama played out in the darkness beneath the City of Lights. The Paris catacombs, this vast and somber kingdom of the dead beneath the bustling city, have inevitably burrowed their way deep into the collective imagination, becoming far more than just a historical curiosity or a feat of subterranean engineering. You see their shadowy influence, their macabre allure, reflected in countless works of literature, film, art, and even music, shaping how Paris is perceived and how we, as humans, contemplate mortality. The catacombs are not just under Paris. They are in Paris, an intrinsic part of its cultural DNA. Think of the writers who have walked these corridors, either literally or in their imaginations. Victor Hugo, that great chronicler of Parisian life, masterfully wove the city's underbelly into his narratives. While Jean Valjean's famous sewer escape in Les Miserables is distinct from the catacombs, Hugo was acutely aware of the city's subterranean realms and their symbolic power. The idea of a hidden world beneath the glittering surface, a place of secrets, suffering, and redemption, permeates his work. You can almost picture him, lantern in hand, notebook at the ready, absorbing the atmosphere, the sheer weight of history contained in those bone-lined tunnels. A mainstream historical fact is that Honoré de Balzac, another literary giant, also referenced the quarries in his La Comédie Humaine, using them as a backdrop for intrigue and hidden dramas, reflecting their already established presence in the Parisian consciousness of the 19th century. As you drift through a gallery of skulls, each one a silent, unread novel, you can understand the magnetic pull for storytellers. The catacombs offer a ready-made setting for tales of mystery, horror, and adventure. Gaston Leroux, author of The Phantom of the Opera, though his phantom haunted the cellars of the Opera Garnier, which itself has a fascinating subterranean water system, captured the popular fascination with Paris's hidden depths. The catacombs provide an even more visceral phantom zone, a place where the lost, the vengeful, or the merely misunderstood could plausibly lurk. In more modern times, the catacombs have become a staple of the horror genre. Countless films and novels have used them as a terrifying playground. You've probably seen at least one, a group of adventurous and usually foolhardy young people, armed with shaky camcorders and even shakier decision-making skills, venturing into the forbidden tunnels, only to find that they are not alone. The walls of bones become more than just a backdrop. They become an active participant in the horror, the skulls seeming to grin malevolently, the shadows concealing unspeakable things. Remember that cheeky, "You probably won't survive this" comment from the beginning? Well, in these fictional accounts, it's practically a guarantee for at least half the cast. It's an easy win for filmmakers. Instant atmosphere, built-in claustrophobia, and a universal fear of death and the unknown. But it's not all jump scares and gore. The catacombs also inspire more philosophical and artistic reflections. And Rice, in her Vampire Chronicles, found the catacombs a fitting haunt for her brooding, immortal characters, a place where the weight of centuries and the proximity of death felt like home. You can imagine Lestat lounging on a pile of femurs, composing a particularly gloomy rock ballad. The visual artists, too, have been captivated. From 19th century romantic painters who depicted the eerie grandeur of the ossuary, to contemporary photographers and sculptors who find inspiration in the stark beauty of bone and stone, the catacombs offer a powerful, if somber muse. Historians still argue whether the predominant cultural depiction of the catacombs as a place of horror and dread overshadows its more complex historical and social significance. Is it primarily a spooky backdrop for fiction, or can these cultural representations also spark genuine interest in its real history and the lives of the millions interred there? It's a delicate balance between sensationalism and education. A quirky tidbit in this cultural vein is the surprising number of underground events that have been staged or rumored beyond the cataphile parties and secret cinemas. Think of fashion shoots with models posing dramatically amongst the skulls, or avant-garde theatrical performances where the audience and actors alike are surrounded by the silent witnesses of the dead. It's the ultimate location if you're going for a vibe that screams memento mori with a dash of existential chic. One almost expects a pop-up artisanal coffee cart down there, serving bone-dry cappuccinos. The catacombs have also influenced urban legends and folklore. Stories persist of secret societies meeting in hidden chambers, of undiscovered treasures buried deep within the network, or even of strange, pale creatures who have adapted to life in the eternal darkness. Less likely, more an import from general subterranean horror tropes, but the catacombs provide fertile ground for such imaginings. These tales, whether true or not, add to the mystique, the sense that the catacombs are a place where anything is possible, where the normal rules of the surface world don't apply. Even the soundscape of the catacombs has found its way into music. Composers and musicians have sought to capture their unique acoustic properties or the emotions they evoke, from ambient soundscapes that mimic the dripping water and profound silence, to more dramatic pieces inspired by their history or the tales associated with them. Ultimately, the catacombs serve as a potent symbol. They are a physical manifestation of the city's past, a tangible connection to the millions who came before. They represent the hidden, the repressed, the things a society might prefer to keep out of sight, yet cannot entirely forget. They are a reminder of our own mortality, stark and unavoidable. This dark reflection in culture isn't just about being scared. It's about being made to think. The skulls and bones, endlessly replicated in art and media, stare back at us, asking silent questions about how we live our lives in the face of inevitable death. And so the catacombs continue to whisper their stories, not just through their stone inscriptions, but through the books, films, and art they inspire, ensuring their place in the ongoing narrative of Paris and the human condition. The Paris catacombs, this extraordinary city of the dead beneath the city of the living, is not an immutable monument. It is a fragile, complex ecosystem, constantly under threat from both natural forces and human actions. As you contemplate your journey through its depths, you become aware of the immense, ongoing battle to preserve this unique underworld for future generations. Saving this silent city is a monumental task, requiring constant vigilance, scientific ingenuity, and a delicate balancing act between conservation and accessibility. The primary threats are inherent to its very nature. Remember the fontis, those sudden, terrifying collapses? The limestone that was so perfect for building Paris is also susceptible to erosion and structural fatigue, especially after centuries of being tunneled and subjected to the pressures of the bustling metropolis above. The Inspection Générale de Carrières, IGC, the unsung heroes of subterranean Paris, wage a continuous war against gravity. You can picture their engineers and workers deep underground, identifying weak points, injecting specialized grout to stabilize crumbling pillars, constructing new support walls of concrete and steel, or meticulously mapping cracks and shifts in the ancient stone. It's painstaking, often dangerous work, carried out in darkness and damp, far from public acclaim. Their efforts are crucial not just for preserving the catacombs themselves, but for preventing sections of Paris from literally caving in. Water is another relentless adversary. The tunnels are naturally damp, and water seepage can accelerate erosion, damage the bone arrangements, and make conditions hazardous. Managing drainage, redirecting underground streams like that Fontaine de la Samaritaine you saw earlier, which needs careful management, and dealing with occasional flooding, especially after heavy rains, are constant challenges. The very material that makes up the ossuary, the bones, can also degrade in overly damp or fluctuating atmospheric conditions. It's a delicate dance to maintain an environment that is stable for both the stone and the skeletal remains. Then there's the human element. The sheer volume of visitors to the official public section of the catacombs, over 500,000 people a year before certain restrictions, inevitably takes a toll. The moisture from breath, the oils from accidental touches, the vibrations from footsteps, even the dust brought in on shoes, can all contribute to the slow degradation of the site. You might notice areas where the bones closest to the pathways seem more polished or discolored. This has led to stricter rules for visitors, limitations on numbers, and the installation of barriers to protect the more fragile displays. Remember those early, somewhat freewheeling visits by 19th century elites? Today, it's a much more controlled, and necessarily so, experience. And of course, there's the perennial issue of vandalism and illicit activity, particularly in the vast, unmonitored sections of the quarry network frequented by some cataphiles. While many cataphiles adhere to a code of respect, others leave behind graffiti, sometimes spray painting over ancient quarry marks or historic inscriptions, litter or cause damage through careless exploration or by creating unauthorized openings between tunnel systems. Historians still argue whether the benefits of having a community of unofficial guardians who explore and sometimes document the quarries outweigh the damage caused by less responsible individuals within that same community. It's a contentious issue, with passionate voices on both sides. One quirky tidbit in the realm of preservation involves the use of modern technology. Laser scanning and 3D modeling are now employed to create incredibly detailed digital archives of the catacombs, allowing for precise monitoring of structural changes and the condition of the bone arrangements. It also means that even if a section were to collapse or be damaged, a perfect digital record would exist. It's like creating a save point for a national treasure, a high-tech way to combat the ravages of time. You can imagine a researcher miles away in a lab, virtually walking through a perfectly rendered tunnel, checking for minute cracks that will be invisible to the naked. The challenge of funding these extensive preservation efforts is also significant. Maintaining hundreds of kilometers of ancient quarries and a unique ossuary is an expensive undertaking. Ticket sales from the official catacombs tours contribute, but public funds and dedicated heritage grants are also essential. There's always a debate about resource allocation, how much to spend on preserving this hidden, somewhat morbid heritage compared to more visible, above-ground monuments. A mainstream historical fact is that major restoration projects have been undertaken in recent decades to address specific issues within the public ossuary. For example, sections of bone walls have been carefully dismantled, cleaned, and reconstructed to ensure their stability, and ventilation systems have been upgraded to better control humidity and air quality. This work often requires temporarily closing sections to the public, a delicate balance between ongoing preservation and the desire to keep this unique site accessible. You feel a sense of urgency, a realization that this silent city is not eternal, despite its residents having achieved a kind of permanence. It requires active, dedicated stewardship. The work of Heracard de Thury in transforming the bone dump into an ordered ossuary was just one phase. The ongoing work of today's engineers, scientists, curators, and even responsible explorers is the next. They are all, in their own ways, trying to ensure that the empire of death doesn't itself succumb to a second, more final oblivion. The battle is against the slow creep of decay, the sudden violence of collapse, and the sometimes thoughtless impact of the living. It's a fight to keep the whispers of Paris's deep past audible for generations to come. Your long subterranean sojourn is drawing to a close. You've witnessed the birth of Paris's shaky foundations in Luton limestone, felt the shadowy toil of the quarrymen, recoiled from the city's groaning graveyards, and understood the desperate, daring plan that led to the creation of this unique ossuary. You've walked with the midnight bone processions, marveled at Thury's morbid artistry, deciphered the philosophical inscriptions, and sensed the awe and fear of the first curious intruders. You shivered at tales of lost souls, delved into the world of modern cataphiles, found echoes of wartime shelter, navigated contemporary perils, seen the catacombs' dark reflection in culture, and pondered the immense efforts to preserve this silent city. Now it's time to ascend, to take your final contemplative steps, carrying the weight of 6 million souls and the countless stories their resting place has accrued back into the light. The ascent is usually via a different staircase from the one you descended, a practical measure for managing the flow of visitors in the public section, but also symbolically poignant. You are not simply retracing your steps. You are completing a circuit, emerging changed by what you have witnessed. The climb feels longer than the descent, or perhaps it's just the anticipation of returning to the familiar world. Each step takes you further from the cool, damp stillness and the endlessly patient gaze of the skulls. The air begins to lose its earthy, ancient scent, gradually replaced by the faintest hints of the city above, a distant rumble of traffic, a trace of exhaust fumes, the smell of warm asphalt perhaps, if it's a summer's day. As you climb, you reflect on the sheer scale of what lies beneath. It's not just the 6 million individuals whose remains form the ossuary, a number so vast it's difficult to truly comprehend. It's also the centuries of labor by quarrymen, the ingenuity of engineers like Guillemot and Thury, the courage of resistance fighters, the adventurous spirit of cataphiles, and the quiet dedication of modern preservationists. The catacombs are a repository of so much more than bone. They are a repository of human endeavor, human frailty, and human resilience. The last few steps, and then you emerge. Blinking, you find yourself back on a Parisian street, perhaps near Denfert-Trochereau, with its somewhat incongruous lion statue. The sudden brightness of the sun, even on an overcast day, is almost shocking after the perpetual twilight below. The noise of the city, cars, voices, music from a distant cafe, rushes in, a stark contrast to the profound silence you've grown accustomed to. For a moment, the ordinary world feels intensely, vividly alive, almost overwhelmingly so. You might find yourself looking at the faces of passers-by with a new perspective, a fleeting awareness of the fragile, temporary nature of the life bustling all around you. You take a deep breath of the surface air. It feels warm, dynamic, a world away from the cool, static atmosphere of the tunnels. Yet, you carry something of that underworld with you. It's not a physical burden, but an awareness, a memory. The ground beneath your feet no longer feels quite so solid, quite so mundane. You know what lies beneath, the silent, sprawling city of the dead that underpins the city of the living. Every step you take on a Parisian pavement might now be accompanied by a faint, subconscious echo of the hollows and the history below. Remember that subtle coolness you sometimes feel from the grates? It now has a much deeper, more resonant meaning. This experience, even imagined, leaves an imprint. The catacombs confront you with mortality on an industrial scale, yet they also speak of order, memory, and a strange kind of continuity. The individuals whose bones form those walls are anonymous, yet collectively they tell a powerful story of Paris, of its growth, its crises, and its ingenious, if sometimes macabre, solutions. A mainstream historical fact to carry with you as you readjust to the light. The official Paris catacombs, the section accessible to the public, represents only a tiny fraction, less than a mile, of the estimated 200 miles of tunnel that comprise the larger network of former quarries beneath the city. What you've seen or imagined seeing is just the tip of a very deep, very dark iceberg. Historians still argue about the ultimate meaning or message of the catacombs. Are they a monument to death, a pragmatic solution to an urban crisis, a work of art, a historical archive, or a place of quiet contemplation? Perhaps they are all of these things simultaneously. Their power lies in their ambiguity, their ability to evoke a wide range of responses, from morbid curiosity to profound philosophical reflection. One final quirky tidbit as you walk away. There's a persistent urban legend that the metro system occasionally and accidentally breaks through into unmapped sections of the catacombs, leading to hushed-up repairs and rerouted ghostly trains. While highly unlikely and more a product of popular imagination, it speaks to the enduring idea of this vast hidden network just inches away from everyday Parisian life, always threatening to intrude. Don't worry too much if your next metro ride feels a bit bumpier than usual, though. You pause, perhaps on a bench, watching the flow of Parisian life. The weight of those 6 million souls is not a morbid one. It's a grounding one. It's a reminder of the layers of history, seen and unseen, that make up any great city. You've journeyed through darkness, through history, through a realm of profound silence and immense human presence. And as you merge back into the sunlit crowds, you carry within you the faint, cool echo of the empire of death, a reminder that even in the most vibrant of cities, the past is always present, often just beneath your feet. Your perspective on Paris, and perhaps on life itself, might be subtly, permanently altered. The immediate, intense sensations of your subterranean journey, the cool dampness on your skin, the unique scent of ancient stone and bone, the profound silence punctuated by the drip of water or the crunch of gravel underfoot, these begin to soften now, like the sharp edges of a memory gradually worn smooth by time and reflection. You are no longer blinking in the sudden sunlight of a Parisian street, but rather settling into a more comfortable, contemplative space, perhaps the quiet of your own room as night deepens around you. The echoes of the catacombs are still with you, but they are becoming gentler, less a series of stark sensory inputs and more a resonant hum in the back of your mind. Think back to the sheer, overwhelming visual impact of those walls of bones, the seemingly endless corridors lined with the remains of 6 million souls. Initially, the sight might have been shocking, even a little unsettling. The skulls with their vacant stares, the femurs and tibias stacked with such morbid precision. But now, as you recall these images, they begin to lose their immediate power to startle. Instead, they transform into something more abstract, a vast, silent tapestry of human existence. The individual identities are lost, subsumed into a collective anonymity, yet this very anonymity speaks to a shared human fate. The sharp chill you felt in those tunnels now translates into a quiet coolness, the kind that often precedes a peaceful sleep. The words you encountered, those carefully chosen inscriptions, Eric, C'est ici l'Empire de la Mort, or the poetic musings on the ephemeral nature of beauty and talent, they no longer ring in your ears as stern commands or somber warnings. Instead, they settle into your consciousness as gentle philosophical reminders, the kind of thoughts that might surface naturally as you drift towards slumber. The urgency or slight apprehension you might have felt when reading them underground is replaced by a more detached, almost serene acceptance of their truths. Life is fleeting, beauty fades. These are not anxieties now, but simple, observable facts, softened by the distance of your return from that realm. Remember the stories? The shadowy toil of the quarrymen, their flickering lamps casting long, dancing shadows as they carved out the very foundations of Paris. The eerie midnight processions, horse-drawn carts laden with their silent cargo, moving through the sleeping city. The almost artistic endeavors of Heracart de Thury, bringing a strange order to the chaos of bones. The chilling legend of Philibert Espert, lost forever in the darkness. The clandestine adventures of the cataphiles, their spray-painted murals and secret cinemas, the hushed, urgent whispers of resistance fighters in their subterranean command post. These narratives, once perhaps vivid and immediate in your imagination, now begin to blend, their distinct details softening into a more general impression of history, of human drama unfolding in those hidden depths. They become less like a documentary replaying in your mind and more like the pages of an old, well-loved history book being gently turned. The mainstream historical facts you encountered, the consecration of the ossuary, the famous visitors like Charles X, the ongoing work of the IGC, these now feel less like quiz questions and more like anchors, grounding the more fantastical elements of the journey in a bed of reality. They provide a reassuring structure to your recollections, the sense that even in the strangest of places, history follows a certain logic, a discernible path. The quirky tidbits, the fossilized sea creatures in the Lutean limestone, the quarrymen's supposed ability to smell their way, the cabinet of skeletal deformities, the secret concerts and film screenings, the rumors of the metro breaking through, these now bring a faint smile to your lips. They are the little sparks of oddity, of unexpected humanity, that prevent the story from becoming too overwhelmingly somber. They add a touch of lightness, a reminder that even in an empire of death, life, in all its peculiar forms, finds a way to express itself. They are like the faint, almost imperceptible scent of that crocodile dung sunscreen you might have imagined from a completely different historical journey, a tiny, amusing detail that lingers. The open scholarly debates, whether quarrymen had systematic geological knowledge, or if Thury's motives were more practical or aesthetic, or if cataphile activity is more preservation or vandalism, these unresolved questions now simply add to the richness and complexity of the catacomb story. They remind you that history is not a closed book, but an ongoing conversation, a series of interpretations. And as you relax, you don't feel the need to solve these debates, merely to acknowledge them as part of the enduring mystery and fascination of the place. The initial disorientation you might have felt, imagining yourself lost in those lightless tunnels, is now replaced by a sense of having been expertly guided, of having completed a journey and returned safely. The fear has subsided, leaving behind only a faint, thrilling echo of adventure. The darkness of the catacombs is no longer a threat, but a memory of a profound and unique experience. The weight of those 6 million souls feels less like a burden and more like a gentle pressure, a reminder of the vastness of human history and your own small, but connected place within it. The echoes are indeed fading, not into silence, but into a soft, resonant background hum, preparing you for the next stage of your nightly journey. The more vivid echoes of your journey through the Parisian underworld continue to soften and recede. The very nature of the darkness you recall begins to transform. The oppressive, absolute blackness of the unlit quarry tunnels, the kind of darkness that felt like a physical presence, capable of swallowing light and hope, now gradually lightens in your memory. It's no longer the stark, intimidating void that confronted Philibert, Spert, or challenged the earliest explorers. Instead, it morphs into something more akin to the gentle, enveloping darkness of a familiar room at night, a darkness that signals rest and reprieve from the stimuli of the waking world. The chill you associated with the catacombs, that deep, earthy cold that seemed to emanate from the ancient stones and the millions of silent inhabitants, also undergoes a subtle alchemy. It's no longer the shiver-inducing cold of a subterranean crypt, but rather the refreshing coolness of clean sheets on a warm evening, or the gentle breeze from a fan softly humming nearby. That familiar sound we spoke of at the very beginning of our journey. The dampness, too, loses its raw, cave-like quality and becomes more like the soothing humidity of a calm pre-dawn mist, a far cry from the dripping water that once echoed so loudly in the profound silence. The skulls, those iconic, ever-present features of the ossuary, no longer stare with empty, accusatory sockets. In your mind's eye now, their forms soften. The stark rows of crania and the intricate patterns of femurs and tibias lose their macabre edge. They become less a direct confrontation with mortality and more a distant, almost abstract pattern, like the subtle designs woven into a comforting old quilt. The empire of death you traverse now feels less like an empire and more like a vast, quiet dormitory where a great city's ancestors are peacefully at rest. Their profound stillness, once perhaps unsettling, now translates into an invitation to your own stillness, your own repose. The silence of the catacombs, that immense echoing void which amplified every tiny sound, a falling pebble, a distant drip, your own heartbeat, also transforms. It's no longer the silence of isolation or of being utterly alone in a vast, uncaring labyrinth. Instead, it melds into the peaceful quietude that settles over a household late night, a silence that is not empty but full of unspoken calm and the promise of restoration. The occasional imagined whisper you might have attributed to the spirits of the dead now fades entirely, replaced by the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a sound that is inherently reassuring and life-affirming. Even the more unsettling aspects of your journey, the thought of overflowing graveyards, the grim labor of the bone transfers, the potential for cave-ins or getting lost, these anxieties now lose their sharp teeth. They become part of a story that has reached its resolution, chapters in a history that, while somber, ultimately led to a unique and strangely beautiful solution. You probably won't survive this. Style warnings now seem like playful exaggerations from a distant past, irrelevant to your current state of growing tranquility. You did survive, you have returned, and the experience has enriched, not endangered you. The sense of confinement, the claustrophobia that might have brushed against you in the narrower passages or when contemplating the weight of the earth above, now dissipates completely. In its place comes a feeling of secure enclosure, like being tucked safely into bed. The tunnels are no longer a maze threatening to trap you, but a memory of a complex path successfully navigated. You are no longer underground, but comfortably above, with the vast dark expanse of the catacombs now a distant, almost dreamlike landscape far beneath you. The philosophical inscriptions, which once prompted active contemplation, now simply add a layer of gentle wisdom to your thoughts, like the faint, lingering scent of incense in a quiet temple. They are no longer challenges to your worldview, but soft affirmations of life cycles, as natural and inevitable as the setting of the sun and the approach of sleep. Heracart Thuri's carefully designed memento mori has served its purpose, and now the mori part gives way to the simple, peaceful present. The darkness you are heading towards is not the darkness of the grave, nor the uncharted blackness of forgotten quarries. It is the restorative darkness of sleep, a familiar and welcoming friend. The transformation is complete. The chilling, historical shadows of the Paris catacombs have alchemized into a pre-sleep hush, a gentle dimming of the world's lights, both internal and external, preparing you for a period of deep and untroubled rest. The once oppressive has become a source of comfort, a quiet prelude to dreams. The gentle pre-sleep hush, born from the transformed memories of the catacombs, now deepens, drawing you further away from the alert, analytical state of wakefulness. The last vestiges of your subterranean exploration are dissolving into an encompassing sense of peace. The journey, with its moments of awe, its shivers of unease, and its profound historical resonance, has run its course. Now only the most tranquil impressions remain, guiding you softly towards the shores of slumber. The sheer number of souls, those 6 million Parisians resting in their orderly subterranean city, no longer feels like a heavy weight on your mind. Instead, it translates into a vast collective sigh, a sense of completion, of stories told and lives lived, now settled into a long and undisturbed repose. There is a profound peacefulness in that image, a sense that all striving has ceased. All anxieties have been laid to rest alongside the bones. This feeling of ultimate resolution, of a great, silent populace finally at peace, now extends to you, inviting your own mind to cease its striving and embrace the calm. The labyrinthine nature of the quarries, The endless branching tunnels that once might have symbolized confusion or the potential for being lost now represent something different. Think of it as the branching pathways of thought slowly converging towards a single point of stillness. The complexities unravel, the mental map you were navigating fades, and all that remains is a simple, clear path towards deep relaxation. You're no longer an explorer charting unknown territory, but a traveler arriving at a familiar and welcoming destination, the sanctuary of your own comfortable bed, the haven of impending sleep. The faint, lingering scent of damp earth and ancient stone, which you carried with you from the depths, has now been entirely replaced by the clean, familiar aroma of your own sleeping space. The coolness of the tunnels is now just the pleasant temperature of your room, perfectly conducive to rest. The darkness is no longer the profound, almost tangible blackness of the unlit quarry, but the gentle, soothing darkness behind your closed eyelids, a darkness that promises rejuvenation. Even Heracart Thury's carefully constructed displays of skulls and bones, his morbid artistry, now serve a final, gentle purpose. The patterns he created, the walls of femurs, the arrangements of crania, they dissolve into abstract, almost hypnotic imagery. Like counting sheep, but with a certain historical gravitas, these repetitive, ordered forms lull your mind, smoothing out the wrinkles of the day's thoughts, encouraging a descent into a slower, more rhythmic pattern of consciousness. The empire of death has fully abdicated its power to startle, becoming instead a realm of profound quietude, a silent companion to your own encroaching slumber. The calls for quiet contemplation, the philosophical inscriptions you encountered, have delivered their messages. Their wisdom has been absorbed, and now they fall silent, allowing your mind to become a clear, still pool. The need to analyze, to understand, to remember specific facts or quirky tidbits, all this gently fades. You are no longer a student of history, meticulously recalling details of Parisian quarrying techniques or the dates of cemetery evacuations. You are simply a being, ready for rest, surrounded by a sense of peace that has been subtly deepened by the journey you've undertaken. The slight edge of sarcasm, the light jokes woven into the narrative, the crocodile dung sunscreen, the Rubik's Cube in the dark, grandma's turnip food, the bone-dry cappuccinos, these too have served their purpose, lightening the mood, preventing the journey from becoming too heavy. Now they fade like the last chuckle of a pleasant conversation, leaving behind a residue of warmth and gentle amusement. You willingly surrender to this encroaching calm. There is no resistance, only a soft yielding. The story of the Paris catacombs has been told. Its echoes have softened. Its darkness has turned gentle. All that remains is the peaceful embrace of the night, the promise of undisturbed sleep, and the quiet anticipation of dreams that, hopefully, will be far removed from labyrinthine tunnels and walls of ancient bones. The final whispers of history are lulling you into a state of perfect tranquility. Peace is descending, soft and complete. The deep, resonant sensations of your subterranean journey, the coolness of the ancient stone, the profound silence of the ossuary, the sheer, humbling weight of 6 million souls resting in their shadowed empire. These feelings have now quietened within your mind, settling like fine dust after a long and significant passage. The vivid imagery of torchlit processions through sleeping Parisian streets, the intricate, macabre artistry of bone-lined walls, the faint, chilling whispers of those lost in the labyrinthine darkness. All these impressions are now gently receding, their sharper edges softened by the encroaching calm of the night. You are no longer actively exploring those depths, no longer deciphering their solemn inscriptions or pondering their many secrets. Instead, you are floating peacefully on the surface, letting the gentle currents of approaching sleep carry you further and further from the world of wakeful thought. The once oppressive shadows of those deep, forgotten quarries have now transformed entirely, becoming a comforting, familiar darkness, the kind that cradles you as you drift into slumber, a pre-sleep hush that promises only tranquility and restoration. The immense history you traversed now feels less like a heavy cloak and more like a soft, warm blanket, enfolding you in a sense of timeless peace. Let the last vestiges of the tale fade, like the distant echo of a closing stone door, sealing away the mysteries of the underworld, leaving only profound quiet in their wake. Surrender now to the gentle, irresistible pull of sleep. As the story concludes, its purpose fulfilled, guiding you softly, peacefully, towards untroubled dreams.